With me here in the studio is Mehmet Gerz. He is the Chief Investment Officer of Ata Asset Management. Ahmet Kasim is a professor at Kadir University, and Onur Erim is a political analyst and author. Joining us from Ankara, the parliamentarian Kamil Aydin. He is the Deputy Chair of Foreign Affairs for Turkey's Nationalist Movement Party. It's part of the governing coalition. And completing our panel from Washington, Nick Danforth joins us. Nick is a senior policy analyst at the Bipartisan Policy Center. All five of you, thank you very much indeed for your time. Shall we start with the basics, Mehmet? What has brought Turkey to the position it is in today? Give us a brief overall summary, if you could.
Well, Turkey has had some macro imbalances accumulating in the last 5 years. The current account deficit, which was not brought down to sustainable levels, inflation, which has never approached central bank's target of 5%, and finally interest rates have started to rise. And all these imbalances has led to a currency depreciation. And the timing of this was unfortunate because Turkey was moving from a presidential system, from a parliamentarian system to a presidential system, and the communication with the markets has not been as effective as should have been. So the timing was unfortunate. There were lots of problems with the US, and the problems with the US served as a trigger for the currency to depreciate. But the real reason, I think, was the macro imbalances which accumulated over the last 5 years. If you remember, there was a term for fragile five some years ago, including Turkey. Basically, these 5 countries had large current account deficit in the order of 5% of GDP. And if you look at those countries, all of them, with the exception of Turkey, has been able to reduce their current account deficit. But Turkey, which was moving in the same in a positive direction some years ago, but last 2-3 years, the current account deficit has started to widen again, which I think is the essential problem which put Turkey into a vulnerable position.
Kamil, that is an independent analysis of what's brought Turkey to the position it's in today. Being inside the government, what would your feeling be? How would you see it?
Yes, with regards to international relations between countries, especially, those who name themselves as allies or partners, I think, we should focus on some principles. And these principles, I think, are the reciprocal responsibilities, respect, and duties, And as far as the relationship between America and Turkey as the allies and the partners, we could not receive more or less the same attitude. And when President Trump moved to the office, honestly, has made some mistakes, which can easily disturb the balance and the good relationship between these two countries. And so far, when he has taken some steps, and we can easily see that, all the balances among the nations, among the countries, are disturbed a bit. And with particular reference to Turkey and American relations, in the last few years, we can easily see that as a member of NATO, Turkey is not treated as it has been deserved by its partner. And, we can easily see in the last action the continuation of this kind of attitude. Why? Because, it is a kind of the last straw, while, putting a kind of the increase on tariff on aluminium and the steel by Turkey. And it is not, accepted by the rest of the world as well. Germany, was not so happy with this decision. China was not so happy as well. And they withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran. And the rest of the world did not accept this as well. So the last one, and Turkey did not deserve this kind of attitude from a partner. Why? Because Turkey has already having so many problems, such as terrorist problem and, on the other hand, migration problem. And the last one, the coup attempt, has some side effects on the nation and on the government. And we are recuperating our country. But this new increase, the decision of increasing the tariff on this stuff, cannot be acceptable by the government and by the people of Turkey as well.
Okay.
Because Turkey is a sovereign country, and we are very fond of our independence anyway.
Well, economic policy is also certainly a political issue. Nick Danforth, you're the only non-Turkish member of this panel. So you've heard the views of the Turkish government. There is a debate going on, of course, whether the devaluation of the Turkish lira was caused by Donald Trump's doubling of tariffs on aluminium and steel from Turkey, or whether it was just a trigger and it was something that possibly could have happened anyway because the situation was precarious. What's the view of an independent, non-Turkish analyst as yourself?
No, I mean, I would say I'm not here as an economic analyst, so I'll avoid going into too much detail on that. We have other people on the panel who can speak to that more clearly. Certainly, my sense watching it is that, as we've heard, there were economic issues, there were macroeconomic problems with the Turkish economy. People had been predicting some sort of potential crisis from well before this issue erupted with the United States. But again, as we've heard, right, the intensification of tensions between the U.S. and Turkey certainly seems to have been a catalyst for the most recent round of devaluation in the lira. And, I'd echo in many ways what Mr. Aydin said. The view from Washington is actually surprisingly similar to the view from Turkey, although in reverse, not surprisingly. There's very much a sense here that the most recent high-profile spat over Pastor Andrew Brunson came about as a result of long-standing frustrations in Washington with Turkey's behavior as an ally, be that Turkey's activities in Syria, Turkey's refusal to support America's fight against ISIS, disagreements over whether the focus of Syria policy should be on the YPG or on ISIS, Turkey's refusal to implement sanctions against Iran, Turkey's purchases of S-400s from Russia. Everyone's heard the long litany of complaints that Washington has. At the same time, again, as Mr. Aydin said, the view from here is similarly that these affronts are particularly frustrating coming from an ally, coming from a country that the United States has long worked with. And then on top of this, again, the detention of Andrew Brunson, not the only issue here, but something that's very much catalyzed opinion. There's also strong feelings of nationalism in the United States. There's a sense that the imprisonment of an innocent American is an affront to our sovereignty, is an affront to our national honor. And that in this context, when this became personalized, when Trump, acting as an embodiment of this sense of American prestige, felt like he'd been deceived by Erdogan, whether this was the result of a miscommunication, whatever exactly happened with the negotiations to release Pastor Brunson. When this became personal between the two leaders, and Trump responded drastically, dramatically, recklessly, however you want to put it, decisively, this quickly reached a new dimension, and this quickly had implications for the Turkish economy.
Okay, we'll discuss the politics of U.S.-Turkey relations and also the politics of the ramifications of what's happening in the Turkish economy in a few minutes. But let's just come back to economic policy for a moment. Okay, so there's an issue, Ahmet, here of orthodoxy and less orthodox ways of managing an economy. Just to give you some figures. Erdogan himself says when he became prime minister in 2003, interest rates were at 63%. Inflation was 30%. They're now, today, 16% and 18%. Does that prove that you can manage an economy like Turkey's of 80+ million people, the 13th richest country in the world, in a way that is different to the way most of the rest of the world follows that neoliberal path of development and searching for economic prosperity?
Well, it's kind of like almost everything else, a problem of how you look at it. These figures are right. Nevertheless, there are other figures. Between 2002 and 2007, the so-called booming years of Turkish economy, Turkey has been ranking 7 places worse in terms of its inflation from the period between 1994 and 1999, which was a period of nightmares for Turkish economy. Or you could say that in 2002, as the governing party, AK Party, came to power, Turkey had $100 billion of external debt versus more than $430 billion today. So I would say that the structural remedy that is needed for Turkish economy has not been in place for all throughout these years. Even though the country was booming, performing very well, it is nevertheless the biggest and most diversified economy between Germany and India. And these are no small things, I have to say. However, this country also is a country whose perennial, I would say, economic problem has always been the lack of capital in the country, which has to be financed one way or the other. That needed more diversification in the economy in the first place. And that was easy to be done while there was high international liquidity with very low interest rates in the international markets, especially after the crisis of 2008 with the quantitative easing of central banks. The money was abundant. However, in Turkey, I think it's not about the government only, but also the private individuals and the businesses made a choice for quick booms. And quick booms necessarily doesn't come out of addressing to more critical issues of the economy themselves. They might come from increasing of wealth through different means. For example, construction or energy projects. Instead of those, Turkey might have had invested more in diversifying its economy, decreasing its import dependence in its exports, so on and so forth. So I think these are the basic reasons. It's about the economic model rather than whatever a certain government is doing or how is it performing.
Okay, so let's try to look at some ways that possibly the government may be able to manage the situation as it is. And as you all know, one thing that everybody's talking about are interest rates. So interest rates at the moment, because interest rates can be used to fight inflation, as we know, right? So interest rates are 16%, and those orthodox economic models suggest that interest rates have to rise to control inflation. Onur, what's the issue here? Why isn't the central bank raising interest rates?
Unfortunately, one of the biggest problems with economy or economic theory is that no one theory works in all countries or in all situations. I think they're doing the correct decision here. The central bank doesn't seem to be moving ahead with raising the interest rates because they don't think it's going to affect that much, if at all, at this point. Because there's a bigger problem of trust issue. Unfortunately, again, there is an aura in the air internationally that Trump may continue to act viciously as if Turkey would equalize Turkey to Iran. So people do have some sense of scares, and that's why as the dollar has been going up, we see the stock market isn't booming, which it should have. So right now there's a big trust issue. I mean, we could discuss the economic model, I guess, or what has happened in Turkey for the past 10, 15 years economically or financially. But right now our bigger issue is on the political side. We need to see somehow that Trump's act to Turkey as if it's, its arch nemesis, as if Turkey is equivalent to Cuba or North Korea or Iran, which it is not historically today and probably won't be tomorrow.
Mehmet, interest rates, what's the issue at the moment?
Well, the interest rates are not 16% right now. Let me make a correction. The central bank funding rate is close to 18%.
That's the inflation.
Yes, 18.
Inflation.
What you referred to
Right.
as inflation.
And the market rates are close to 25%.
Market rates
The two-year government bond rates are
Right.
close to 25%. So the market rates have actually risen in response to what's going on. It's only the central bank rate which has remained low. And I agree that the central bank may not have a lot to do right now, but I think the investors want to see that the central bank is in a position to make independent decisions. I think that's more important than what the rates are. And as I said before, there's a transition in Turkish economic policy right now, and the new government has announced some headlines regarding the new economic policy, but not all the details. the medium economic program will be announced in September. But the government has released some headlines which are there will be a fiscal rule and there will be much more emphasis on capital markets, pensions, and rather than Turkey financing all of its development with bank loans, there will be a transition towards capital markets, which means equity. So I think these are right steps in the new area, because the US dollar rates will be rising. So instead of financing all the economy based on foreign exchange loans, Turkey should be doing much more on developing its capital markets. So these are some positive things that we heard. But regarding the central bank independence, in principle, yes, it will be independent. But how will it be independent? That has not been addressed yet.
Okay, we have a clip of President Erdogan talking about how Turkey can manage the situation. And let's just listen to that before I come to you, Kamil.
Whatever product we import, we will produce it much better and export it. We will boycott their electronic products.
Kamil, President Erdogan prides himself on being a champion of the people. How much is the falling lira hurting the people of Turkey?
I think before that I would like to say something different. And I all agree that we are having an economic problem because of this sudden sliding of Turkish liras. But the main factor, the pushing factor behind this is very political. And, Turkey has always been a good friend of American people since the Korean War and a good ally of NATO all throughout the century, But now, Turkey did not deserve such kind of treatment. And this scandalous decision, as a result of this scandalous decision, we are having some economic problem. But on the other hand, we have got a very, good Turkish saying that, bad neighbor can make you own a new house. And we are trying to, unite again. And in order to solve the problem, of course, we need that, we don't need the panic. And they would like to impose upon us the panic air. But Turkish people are, very well determined about coming together and being united in order to get rid of this problem. But, the president says, why you are doing this? Our economic ties are ongoing process. And why do you want to disturb this process? Of course, you can get stuck with the election campaign slogans, because Trump used to say, and still are very, keen on repeating himself, saying America first, or I'll make America great again.
Okay, Kamil,
of course, it is your suit right to say this.
Great. Do you mind if I interrupt you? Well, let's pick up on this point.
On the
with
other hand,
Danforth.
you have to give the same right.
Absolutely, Nick. Is President Trump pushing Recep Tayyip Erdogan further towards Russia, further towards China? He says that I will have to find new friends if this economic siege of my country continues.
Again, I'm struck by, in a weird way, how similar the view is here to the view in Turkey, and that people looking at this from Washington are very much in agreement that this is a political rather than purely economic issue. They just see it as a political issue caused by President Erdogan. It's been very striking that whenever Erdogan or his son-in-law have gone on TV and made a speech about the economy, the value of the lira has dropped very quickly. The concern in international markets seems to be that Erdogan and his government are approaching this as from an ideological or a political standpoint rather than from an economic standpoint, that they're making this a battle of wills, that they're making this a test of Turkish sovereignty rather than, say, taking pragmatic steps that would end the crisis. Now, as you said, there's real concern in Washington that the fallout from this will end with Turkey moving closer to Russia, closer to Iran, perhaps. That's been one of the things that's kept previous administrations and even this administration from taking the kind of steps that Trump is taking right now. There very much was a fear of losing Turkey as an ally.
Okay, Nick,
but at the same time,
I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to
a growing
interrupt you as
frustration
well.
was building
I'm really sorry, Nick. We've only got
Certainly.
90 seconds left. And Mehmet and
But-
Onur, you haven't spoken much. So
But
give
it
me
is
a
not
very
only
brief...
Turkey who disagrees with these decisions. I think the rest of the world disagrees with these decisions. If it is economic, it might be acceptable by anybody else. And it's not only Turkey. China, disagree. Germany disagrees. Iran disagrees. The rest of Europe disagrees.
Yes, Italy's also
So
come out
if it
in
is
support.
economic,
Absolutely.
I think it might be acceptable by the rest of the world.
Totally understand, Kamil. Italy has come out in support
Yes.
of Turkey as well. So too has Pakistan. Okay, very briefly, if you don't mind.
Germany does the same thing. China,
Ahmet,
China.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Kamil. I'm really sorry. Ahmet, give us a very brief assessment of the possible international implications of what's happening right now.
Well, I think that the lack of trust between the parties as things are unfolding today constitutes the biggest risk because this does bring in the probability of escalation. And in such times as we are passing through, escalation might definitely go out of control, and the parties might be forced to take steps that would be irrevocable out of that escalation, because the things can get out of hand and become unmanageable very easily. And I think that neither the so-called East can replace the so-called West's place in Turkey's economics and politics, nor it is actually a guarantee of anything that that would become better.
And Onur, briefly, if you don't mind.
Looking at the way that Trump has been acting and is acting right now, I think it's safe to say he's going to make more foes than friends internationally in the coming up days. Let's not forget the U.S. has midterm elections in November. There's a very big possibility that Republicans will lose majority. That will not only make Trump's presidency harder, but it will probably pave his way, as most Democrats are talking about right now, to impeachment. So Trump is going to attack even more severely to international, to everywhere. Turkey is right now, it seems for him, a very easy target, but it will not be so, I believe so. And hopefully, our breath will be enough till November.
Mehmet, Ahmet, Onur, Kamil, Nick, thank you all very much indeed for joining us on the Newsmakers.